Well, I've seen worse, but this one needs to be serviced anyway. So I'm going to remove the prism by removing the 2 screws at the end here. Don't unscrew that one on the prism itself. You won't like the answers, you won't like that, that'll cause you grief. If you disturb that, life suddenly becomes a lot less, not quite as nice as it used to be. That's a tedious business if you move that. Right, here, stretch this out, remove that pin. I'm going to mark the position of the arm here because the bush is in a slot. It can be shifted left or right. Yeah. That's used for adjustment, and you're better not to have to muck with that. So you're better by far that you can get that arm back in the same position it came from. I've got this handy tool, this spanner, that'll loosen that for me. But a pair of stiff tweezers will generally do the job. That screw comes out. There's a wavy washer here. There's a little bit spot of rust on that. Now the arm comes out. Now there's a bush, brass bush in that arm. I usually mark it and the arm so I can put it back in the same position it came from. It's not really eccentric, but it acts like an eccentric. It's got a slot in it, so it's probably not always perfectly round. Retrieve this. This is the sliding bush that I mentioned that the screw runs into, runs in that slot there. We'll remove the rear eyepiece lens, single screw there. And that mask comes off, and there's our glass. Now that's flat on one side, convex on the other. Convex side goes in, flat side goes out. This screw can come out. That's tight. That bracket off. Remove this spring from the mask and centre silver lines, and this one here is locked in with some lacquer. So I'm going to use some acetone to soften that lacquer and then remove the spring that holds all that together. Let's put a drop of acetone on there. A drop of acetone on here. And because that's never enough, I'll do the same again. Yeah, you need to be quite cautious with getting this all apart, because the glass with the silvered lines on it is quite thin and fragile, and if you break it, that's the end of that. So I'll slide out that clip. It's the same as the clip that was holding the other piece in, except that it's more curved and it looks like it's a heavier material. So I've just applied a bit of light pressure on that, and that freed up all that lot. So we've got our glass with the silvered lines on it. At the front we've got the mask with our parallax marks on it, and here we have the glass lens at the front, flat on the front, very heavily concave on the back, and here's the little metal mask that sat behind it. So all of these parts I need to clean up, and the body I'll clean in the ultrasonic cleaner to clean the semi-silvered mirror that's in here, because it's exceptionally easy to wipe that silver off. I'll start with the cleanup. I want to get that lacquer off this little mask. Now that mask's painted, and if you overdo it you'll have the paint off as well, so don't overdo it. I just want that clean. This is the glass from the front, silvered on one side, I need to get all that lacquer off there. The silver is reasonably durable. If you go rubbing at it, you'll remove it. It's not uncommon for the silver to be largely missing, and that's probably just through corrosion caused by atmospheric conditions as much as anything else. The silver just disappears. And here I'm most concerned with getting any of that lacquer off the glass surface, particularly in the middle where you're trying to see through it. You don't want anything on there, a smear of it. Here's the front glass. The edge has obviously got the most lacquer on it. I'm trying my best to make sure that's free from any smears. This little mask at the front is celluloid, I think. Acetone doesn't seem to affect it, or doesn't seem to adversely affect it, so it can be cleaned with acetone to get any of that lacquer off. That looks good. In the rear, the eyepiece lens and the other silver mask, they were never lacquered in place, so I'll clean them with some glass cleaner. This finder's quite a clean example. It's much more common to find them exceptionally grimy. There's about 20 air glass surfaces in this viewfinder system, and they all gather up a certain amount of grime. As you'd expect, it's probably worse on the outside surfaces than the inside surfaces, but they all tend to gather it up. Okay, so I'm quite pleased with the state of that. I've just got to wipe this with a bit of naphtha to make sure that there is no oil or grease where that arm's been swinging, because frequently there is. There's usually some sort of lubricant there. I'm not seeing any in this case, which is suspicious and leads me to believe someone's cleaned that and pretty much put nothing back there. There's virtually nothing coming off here. There should be something. And that wavy washer has a little rust patch on there which seems to have wiped off. That must have been very superficial. Okay, that's good. This piece I'm now going to take to the ultrasonic cleaner, and I'll give it 3 minutes in a small drinking glass of hot water with a couple of drops of ordinary dish soap and that glass itself will be surrounded by water in the ultrasonic cleaner. That way you only need a small amount of cleaning solution, not a large volume, and I'll be back when that's done. Well, basically all I do is give it 3 minutes in the ultrasonic, fish it out, run it under the hot tap, blow away all the moisture and dry it with a hairdryer, using the blower and the hairdryer at the same time. You do not want any droplets sitting on a glass surface to evaporate from that point, because they'll just end up leaving coffee rings. It doesn't seem to matter how clean your solution was. Well, in the ultrasonic cleaner, this little piece came loose. It's usually just fixed in place with a touch of lacquer perhaps. Yeah, I've just pushed it back into position there. And that just supports the rear eyepiece glass, if you like. And that looks pretty good, so we'll just pop that in place. Just looking at that, I can see a speck on the other side of that, so I'll just give that a wipe. Oh, that little piece fell out, did it? Yes, it did. Okay, let's leave that there. Give the eyepiece glass a wipe. It's the inside surface I'm most concerned about, of course, because that's the one I can't get to easily. The outside surface is nowhere near as much trouble. Yeah, that looks good now. This is held on with a single screw. Magnetised screwdrivers. Magnetised screwdrivers are a blessing or a curse, depending on what you're trying to do. I'll have to go and demagnetise this. Just check the look of that. That looks very good. Now this piece was the middle glass lens with the silver lines on it, so I've got to watch which side the silver lines are on, which surface they're on. It's this surface. The silver line should face to the front, and that's the larger rectangle. This metal mask goes behind it, and that was held in place with the finer of the two springs. Just looking at that, that looks fine. Now the front glass, just giving that a final wipe. This metal mask goes on it, that's on the concave side, it goes over the concave surface. Just checking, looking at that, making sure I've got no dust inclusions, and slide that into place. This rectangle with the rectangular silver lines goes behind that. Now the silver lines on this needs to be on the surface at the back. That's on in there. Here is the mask on from the front with their parallax correction marks in it. Now the dull grey side goes to the front. There should be parallax correction marks at the top on both sides. And I'll slide this spring clip in that holds all that stuff in place. And that's back together. Put the little cover on the end and do that screw up. Right, I'll have a quick look out the window, making sure that it's nice and clear and that the silvered lines, your frame lines, are quite visible. These ones are in very good condition, and so they show up nice and clearly. That's not always the case. I'll put the prism on the end here first. Now this prism, I haven't done anything about cleaning this yet, so I'll just take a cotton bud, put a touch of glass cleaner on it. Now there are three surfaces we can get to. The front surface, the angled end surface here, and the inside surface. Got to make sure there are no cotton threads left in there from the cleaning process. That all looks good. And the prism goes back in place. I'll run the two screws down very lightly. These screws hold that prism in position. And they adjust the position of the prism, so you can adjust them to get your vertical alignment correct. So I want these on fairly even so that the prism starts fairly square to the end of the housing. That looks good. Now to get the other bits together, alright, let's start with this piece. So I haven't cleaned the glass here yet, so some glass cleaner on a cotton bud, swirl it around the inside, do the outside surface with the dry end of the cotton bud, polish that lot up. That's all good. Make sure there's no dust. We've got to put our brass bush back in there, so I'm just give a quick wipe with some molybdenum paste. Just looking at my alignment marks that I put on there to start off with. Align those. Give that surface a light white with molybdenum paste. It doesn't need much. And now we can assemble this. I've got a jig to help me do that. Here's the jig. Right, so what have we got to achieve? Well, this little thing here needs to be popped into place on the inside from here. So you've got to sort of come in around the corner and drop it into position, and then my jig will drop in on the top of it and hold it from getting away. And I can flip the jig over, and there you can see the underside of it right there, which makes it very convenient for me to come in with the arm, put that in position. And I want to give that a light wipe with molybdenum paste around here where the wavy washer will run. So we can put the wavy washer on there. And I can put the screw in place. And with a stiff pair of tweezers, I can run that screw down and back it off a bit, and then bring the whole lot up to align the end of that arm with this mark that I put on there when I took the thing apart. That's probably a good place to start. I'll just nip that up. Here's our return spring. That can come off the tube, and I need that through the end of the spring and stretch it out and hook that spring into place. Make sure that the arm moves freely, and I'll look out the window and see what my alignment's like. Well, it's pretty good. The vertical alignment's slightly off, horizontal alignment too, but both of them are good enough at that stage that basically I could put that back on the camera body. I'll see if I can get my rest position, which should be your infinity position for all practical purposes, correct. So viewing an infinity target, the images don't quite come together, so if I slacken that screw off slightly, that'll allow the arm to fall back further, and that's all it required. My vertical alignment's incorrect. I'm just checking to see what I've got. My moving image is too high, so I need to tighten the rear screw up slightly. And the vertical alignment may well change when you get it on the camera body, because this arm will be influenced by the stud on the camera that moves it. That appears to be quite good. That's certainly good enough to put on the camera body and set up. So that's what I'll do next. I can put my rangefinder back on the body now, so I will take off the rubber band. In fact, I might put that over there just for good measure, so to keep that in place. And I'm going to put a couple of drops of lacquer on the bottom of this to stop it having any tendency to shift. It's not doweled, it's simply screwed down. There's sufficient play around the screw holes that rangefinder can move. And that's the sort of thing that happens when a camera gets dropped. Of course, nobody admits to ever dropping their camera, but believe me, cameras do get dropped. They get dropped fairly frequently, and stuff happens. Right, so making sure that's in place and that arm is free to move. Line up the screw holes, drop in a screw from the top. Hopefully that drops straight into the correct spot and I can get my screwdriver onto it. Run that one down. The second one, did that drop in? No, it did. Yes, it's in now. Now I hold the rangefinder back against this ridge at the back there. Keep it square to the body. and do up those two screws. Now it doesn't matter how well aligned you had that rangefinder out of the body, almost certainly the arm is not correctly adjusted to the rangefinder now. So I'll probably have to adjust my horizontal alignment here and quite frequently the vertical alignment here. So I'll just check, looking out the window, see what I've got. Yes, well the horizontal alignment is well out. So I'll undo that lock screw and adjust this screw to swing that arm slightly forward and check again. Well, that's pretty good. My vertical alignment, the moving image is too high. So I'll slightly slacken the front screw, slightly tighten the rear screw, check again. You don't need to move these much at all. I've moved that too far. So I'll slightly tighten the front screw. That's pretty good. I have a good selection of targets right on the skyline here, so I can see how things are aligning quite well. I need to bring that in slightly. Is that screw loose? Let's just check that I didn't move that too far. Okay, so that's, folks, that's going past infinity. That'll be because I've moved that. So I've got to screw that screw in slightly. That appears to be very good. I'm going to lock that there and check to make sure it didn't shift when I locked it. That seems to be good. I'm quite happy with the state of that. What can we do now? Well, I can lock that screw here at the top of the film advance. I'm just going to put just a little tiny dot of lacquer in each of those little holes. That'll stop that screw from wiggling loose. It's not particularly prone to wiggling loose, but it certainly can't hurt. What else have we got to go on here? Let's have a quick look. The meter. And the film release button and shutter release button. So we'll start with the film release button. I'll just give that a wipe through the centre with some molybdenum paste. Put its return spring on. Put that over the shaft. I did tighten that shaft, didn't I? Let's have a quick check. Yep. My exposure meter held in with two screws. One of them is here. So we'll take that one out. I'll apply a little bit of synthetic grease to that film advance gear at the top there. I'm just putting a wedge of it in between the teeth in that little triangle. That'll spread itself around quite nicely.